Joining us back on Wall Street Silver today is our good friend Andy Schectman, the CEO of Miles Franklin. How are you doing today, Andy?
Ivan and Jimmy, it's always such a pleasure to be here. I'm doing well, and I hope you guys are doing well too. I know you guys have been anything but not busy, and I see you everywhere. I follow you very closely, and it's great to be here, you guys.
Well, thank you so much for taking time and even talking to Wall Street Silver. First question we have is from Ali Justo. He is saying the dollar strengthened like crazy today. Is the dollar milkshake theory playing out?
You know, I think that right now the dollar is as Doug Casey says, the prettiest mare in the slaughterhouse or the nicest home in a crappy neighborhood. The dollar doesn't have any real challengers yet. And so Brent Johnson's theory of the milkshake theory is you know, yeah, I buy it. In fact, I was on an interview the other day with Liberty and Finance, where I said I expect the dollar to rally from right here, and it was just touching 90, where it's been 2 or 3 times before recently under very similar market conditions, and it bounces. When everyone expects the dollar to crater through 90 and plummet, that's when it's time to realize it probably won't happen. I've heard rumors that the PBOC has told their banks to start buying dollars, that the dollar has gotten too weak against the renminbi, or the renminbi has gotten too strong against the dollar, and it makes acquisition of all of the world's commodities difficult. I think they would rather see a strong dollar, at least now, until course is reversed. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think until we see a real challenger emerge to challenge the dollar for singular world reserve status, yeah, you will see, I think, somewhat of the milkshake theory where people rush to the dollar in times of turmoil. But I mean, I guess if I were going to take it a step further, I would say this is a temporary phenomenon, because ultimately I believe what the Chinese have done and are doing is setting up to do just that, to challenge the US dollar for singular world reserve status. And if you look at what they've done, you guys, they set up a system almost identical to the SWIFT system in all the BRICS nations. And a lot of the European countries, much to the chagrin of the US, have signed on to it. It is a system that will sidestep the SWIFT system, which the US uses as a punitive stick, if you will, when in sanctions, when countries are not doing what the US feels is in their best interest. So they set that up. And then they set up the Shanghai Gold Exchange. The Shanghai Gold Exchange, which has delivered almost 90 times more gold than the COMEX market over the last 2 years. And the reason that it has is because they set up the Chinese petro-yuan bond. Mm-hmm. Chinese petro-yuan bond directly challenges the US petrodollar status. China can sell or buy oil from Iran and natural gas from Russia. Again, they don't care about any punitive action that the US is going to take against them. They're continuing to do it. And those bonds, which are denominated in yuan, are immediately convertible into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. This is why they've delivered so much more gold than the COMEX. So just right there, you have a SWIFT system complement or sidestep. You have the petrodollar sidestep. And then you look at a country through the Chinese Belt, Road, and Rail Initiative we've talked about, where they're connecting 70% of human population between Asia and Africa, that most of the contracts are settling in the new Chinese digital yuan. They're ahead of us on that forefront as well with the digital currency. Now, they have been accumulating more gold than anyone in the world for a very long time. They took 60 tons last month, 50 to mainland, 10 to Hong Kong. And they are, in general, accumulating somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 tons a month or more. And that's what we know of. And this goes back a long time, but they're also the largest producers of gold in the world. And they don't export an ounce. And so if I had to guess, if I put it all together, I see a progression where they are building an infrastructure, not only internally with their ghost cities and their 12 airports a month or a year that they're building, and the new roads and the bridges, and it's just a beautiful infrastructure. But now they're taking it to Africa, where so many of the world's commodities are located in sub-Saharan, and they're going to create an infrastructure where they dominate the landscape with the new Chinese digital yuan. And I believe in my heart of hearts, you guys, that for now, the dollar is still king. But when it becomes obvious that all of this money creation and all of this deficit spending and the modern monetary theory and the basic universal income bullshit that has been going on that is eviscerating the value of the dollar, when it becomes obvious that there is nowhere left to go but down the inflationary drain, that's when they pull out the trump card and say, well, here are our real gold figures, the amount of gold that we own. Alistair McLeod came out the other day and said it's 38,000 tons. We supposedly have like 8,500 tons. They supposedly have 38,000, and he said 20,000 went to the state, 18,000 to the people. You know, this is a country that runs advertising campaigns on TV, on the back of buses, on billboards, just like the beautiful one behind you, telling their people to buy gold. So between the state and the public, they expect to have, or he expects them to have 38,000 tons, almost 5 times what we have. And their trump card, if you will, to me, is when it's obvious that the dollar is spiraling down that inflationary drain, they come out and they issue a gold backing to their digital yuan, and it's game over for the US. The moral of the story is they think in terms of decades, and you can see that in terms of their infrastructure, both internally and externally, the way that they've set up systems to usurp the petrodollar and the SWIFT system, and their accumulation of gold, their rampant accumulation of commodities, not just gold, nickel and copper and iron and lumber and all of these things that you would need in a war chest, a real war chest. And they are building an economy and a system based upon equity when ours is based upon debt. And there will come a time, you guys, when the rubber meets the road, when we least expect it. And this is why I believe that the movements of these very sophisticated investors globally, a common thread of taking possession of metal, whether it be off of COMEX, the huge amount of deliveries that you guys keep showing, how the difference between PSLV and what the COMEX inventories, there's no coincidence that the big money is draining COMEX. They're taking possession. They're moving it into places that I think are way out of harm's way. Big money has been doing this for 4 years in anticipation, I think, of this dollar event. When does it happen? Don't know. But until that happens, Brent's theory, I believe, will be right, because it is the prettiest mare in the slaughterhouse. The fundamentals behind it are putrid. But then again, it is the world reserve currency, and until it is proven otherwise, I think his point is valid.
Well, the one thing you just mentioned was the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, and I actually was planning on asking you about that today, because you have spoken so often about it in the past, and this plays into everything in terms of the future of our economic system. And that's going to affect silver and gold dramatically, and that's why we're talking about it. Some people might look at this and going, "Hey, this is Wall Street Silver. Why are we talking about this? This affects everything."
Yeah, in fact, Jimmy, I believe it's the biggest event of all of our lives, and your children's lives too, because what you see right there is 70% of human population, 45% of global GDP right now, before they industrialize Africa, and they are connecting the two continents, not just by maritime channels in blue there, or railroad or roads, maybe in black. I don't know if that's what that means, but the point of it is they're also doing it digitally. And that digital connection of 70% of human population takes a copious amount of silver. But because it's all being done on the digital yuan, you see, what makes the dollar strong is everyone has to use it to settle contracts in, but the Chinese are incentivizing the rest of the world, or the rest of Africa here, and where all of these contracts are being settled, to use the digital yuan. And so now you are indoctrinating 3/4 of human population into a new system. And if they come out and back it by gold and use the distributed ledger to show the immutability of that gold, the veracity of it, it's game over. And I think that's exactly what they are doing. And they already spent the last several years doing it internally, building their ghost cities and all the airports and all the infrastructure. Now they're moving out to where all of the commodities are located, and that is in those two continents.
Yeah, they're making, these are essentially both modern highways and rail connections. Is my, high-speed rail, freight rail are the black lines, plus upgrading highways through. I mean, some of these areas in Russia, there's just like nothing for 1,000 miles. And they're just basically cutting through it to create the corridors for.
And who do you think is paying for that, by the way?
Them. I'm pretty sure that I heard that the countries who want this projects have to go get loans from China, and then China either gives them the loan, or they'll take a 99-year lease. I heard in Africa they took in like a couple 99-year leases on some ports.
And what's happening is when these countries can't pay their loans, then China just forecloses on it and moves their own people in and takes ownership of the assets.
I would agree with that, and I would also like to add, it's become common knowledge that the Chinese are not rolling over many of their treasuries. In fact, they're cashing them out. Mm-hmm. So by the trade imbalance that we have, whereby we buy their products and send them dollars and create this negative balance in trade, now they're taking what they used to take that money and buy bonds with it, but in an environment where the last CPI numbers, which we all know are bullshit, said 5%. They call it transitory. John Williams just came out and said it's 12%, and hyperinflation is coming. So why would the Chinese ever give us their money to earn 160 basis points when inflation is running 3.5 times that? They wouldn't. So they're pulling that money out, and instead, money that we gave them is now financing the ultimate demise of the dollar in financing this, what is the most ambitious infrastructure project ever attempted in human history. This is a big deal. I used to say that Basel III reclassification of gold as a tier 1 reserve was the biggest event. Well, this is 1A, or maybe passes the reclassification, but it all fits into play. First, they all start bringing back their gold from the Bank of England and the New York Fed. Then they start wickedly accumulating it, they being the central banks. Then they reclassify it, and you can see the progression that's happening. Everything is moving away from the dollar being the supreme value or the store of value, which really it isn't any longer. And I think we are witnessing history in the making. And when I say this is the biggest event of our children's career, our lives rather, teaching your children Mandarin right now ain't a bad idea, because that's the way it looks like the power is shifting. And it may not happen today or tomorrow or June 28th, may not happen next year, but you can see a culture that thinks long term. They are setting themselves up to be the preeminent power for generations to come.
We were talking, I think, with I had you on with Craig Hemke, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, and we were talking about that. The same thing that happened with palladium. Palladium's a much smaller market, but we see the sort of same beginnings of that happening with silver right now, in that the leverage just gets so overwhelming. There's just there wasn't enough physical to handle the number of paper contracts that they were playing around with, and it just sort of imploded on itself. And now palladium is much more of a trading where it should. They broke the market sort of by accident, whereas we're just stacking, take the physical off the market, and hey, let's let the chips fall where they may, and find out who's, they say when the water goes down, you find out who's swimming naked.
Right.
I probably did I just butcher that quote or something? But I think that's.
Well, I get your point. I certainly get your point. And the point of it that also, when you look at palladium, they stopped messing with it because the supply became so constrained, and most of the supply comes from Russia. You could argue, when you look at palladium, that palladium is a good example, I think, of almost like copper in reverse. Well, I take that back. That's not right. Palladium is an asset that is primarily used in industry. It's primarily used as the main catalyst for unleaded automobiles. It does have a monetary aspect to it, but really not much of one. Most people don't even know what palladium is. And if I showed you a palladium coin, a platinum coin, and a silver coin, and held all three in my hand, and you couldn't see the marking, you guys would even have, I do, a difficult time of telling which is palladium, which is platinum, which is silver. They all look the same. So when we talk about palladium, it has a very minimalistic monetary benefit, and we've sold it, we sell it, we offer it, but it's a very tiny, less than 0.5% of what we do, if that. And this is one of the reasons why you could see silver mirror what happened in palladium, but only on steroids, because silver being the only asset that comes to my mind that is bracketed both sides by huge demand. And as we talked about, I might have been with you, I'm not sure, I do so many of these, where Steve St. Angelo, SRS Rocco, came out with a chart showing for the last 20 years or so, and I think that was with you, Jimmy, where the demand for silver is about 80% industrial, 20% monetary until 2020 when it flip-flopped. You are seeing, in large part because of groups like yours, an awakening, a renaissance into the understanding of what silver is in a monetary aspect. And it's actually overtaking the hugely, there it is. And you can see where that 569 versus 212, well, that's unheard of. Where the monetary demand is actually greater than, to a large degree, the industrial side. And it's here again in 2021. So you see an asset that is massively needed in industry, especially when you see that Biden just signed away the future of the auto industry and the oil and gas and the coal by going with this accord to go green by a certain time. They want to go to all vehicles that don't have emissions and this and that. And we're moving into a world that's green, that's digital, and the Belt Road and Rail Initiative connecting 70% of the world digitally. You need silver. So on a industrial standpoint, in my mind, it looks more like it did in years past. But if what that chart shows is true, and you actually have that kind of voracious worldwide monetary demand, you guys, you're sitting on a powder keg. And maybe this explains why there's so many deliveries coming off of COMEX. Maybe the big money sees this coming, and they're trying to get their silver out of the building. And that's what's happening in 2021 that we didn't see in 2020. 2020, we saw all these deliveries on COMEX, but Chris Marcus and I would talk, well, why the hell are they still sitting in the vaults? Why not get it out? And now you're seeing millions and millions and millions and millions of ounces leave the building as the deliveries are on pace with what we saw last year. If these charts hold true, we are not very far away from a seminal moment where it becomes palladium, where there just isn't enough demand, or supply rather, to make it worth the while of the big banks to try to suppress the price. Because I would submit the only way to successfully manipulate a market over time is to push it in the direction it's going. And if the whole world, both industrially and monetarily, like a la 2020, start demanding silver when you can't get it, there's going to be a problem.
Since 2019, you can see the blue part of the graph. This represents investment demand. In just rough numbers, has your retail business, I don't know, roughly doubled since when? 2018, 2019 to now? Or what's been the growth path you've seen in retail demand?
2020 was almost 4x of what we've done on average. We did just about 600 million in sales in 2020, of which I would say over.
But there's a lot of gold in there. I mean, there's a lot of. This is just silver on this graph.
I would say over 90% of those sales were silver. In fact, it's gotten to the point where I'm surprised when people are calling to buy gold. There is no question, 100%, that silver is the most demanded asset that we offer. Platinum, palladium being a distant third and fourth, and gold being almost a distant second. Now, when you get into purchases of 7 figures, taking possession of 7 figures of silver is like taking possession of 3 live elephants. It's not easy to do, but you know, that's where gold has its role. But I will tell you in 100% sincerity, and not just because your show is called Wall Street Silver, it's because it's true. And the whole industry would tell you this, that at least 90% of every transaction we do, and we're already way ahead of last year's sales, 90% or more, 95% are silver. And it is the biggest challenge of my business life, securing this stuff, because before it even hits our loading dock, it's sold, and the demand is off the charts. What has happened that is so far different? You know, everyone always says, well, it's different this time. It's different. And most of the time it's not. But what is different this time is there is an understanding, and I get emails from all around the world. There is an understanding, and God bless you guys. You know, you guys are aiding and abetting this understanding as much as anyone out there. And that understanding, that awakening, is creating an environment where people realize that when you look at the landscape, there are very few, if any, assets out there that are of value. What asset can you find that you buy at basically half of what it was at its peak in 1980? Nothing is the answer. And so I think there's a realization and an awakening that silver is a pure value play, and it's gotten traction. So it represents over 90% of our sales, Jimmy, and that's for sure.
Let me, we just had an interview with Jim Rogers like a couple of days ago, where he was saying the same thing. He loves gold, he loves silver, but just on a pure value basis right now today, he'd go way more in silver than he would in gold. He says gold is near its all-time high. It's down a little, but it's still relatively near, whereas silver still has so far to go in terms of, so on a percentage basis, silver is definitely the play still for this monetary, I don't know, would you call it a reset we're headed for? Would that be a fair word? Do you think we're headed for a full?
I think it is absolutely a fair word. When you get the International Monetary Fund, 195 countries from around the world say we want a new system or a new Bretton Woods. When you have the World Bank say we have a global reset, well, let's remember that both of these two entities were formed at Bretton Woods in 1944 in New Hampshire after the war. So they're both closely tied to the U.S. system, and yet they're both saying we want a new system or a global reset. And when you see the actions of an administration that is printing money as if it grows on trees, it almost as if they've already resided to that outcome, and they're trying to milk as much out of the system as they possibly can. I take it one step further, and you see the reclassification of gold as tier one and the massive accumulation by the central banks, commercial banks, sovereign wealth funds. They're all front running whatever is coming next, and whatever is coming next, they are using precious metals as their vehicle to quietly using price as a tool to misdirect the public at large. But the acquisitions and the distributions off of the exchanges, both the LME, the COMEX, backdooring the ETFs, is very, very illuminating to me. And this is one of the things that I always talk about, misdirection. Big money is indeed preparing for what appears to be a reset, and they are misdirecting the public by goosing all of the equities to all-time highs and using the price, which is controlled and has been for a very long time until it's not, to accumulate precious metals. And it seems to me as if that will be the foundation of a new system. And so, yes, Jimmy, I do think you're right. It seems to me like they are preparing for some sort of a reset. What that looks like, I guess that's anyone's guess. I just got done doing an interview with Bill Holter, who's one of my best friends, and Bill and I go way back, and Bill is Jim Sinclair's partner. And they talk publicly about two resets that they believe will happen. And I, out of respect to Mr. Sinclair, I'm not going to tell you the whole story because he told me in confidence where he got this information from. But I'll simply say this, that what they believe is there will be two resets. The first will be man-made. And when you do a man-made reset, it's bullshit because it's the same people controlling the same problem, papering it over with a new digital system or a new system that's still fiat. He believes the second reset will be Mother Nature, where Mother Nature says, no, this is how it has to be. And you have to go back to sound money and the roots. Whether or not that's true, simply stating, you can see big money has been accumulating metal as, for whatever reason, and in my mind's eye, it's to protect against whatever is coming next or to build a foundation for whatever is coming next. And you know who started this was the German Bundesbank in 2017, and all the European banks getting their gold back from the Fed and the Bank of England. And since then, it's been a linear progression of the biggest money in the world doing the same thing, buying metal, taking possession of it off the exchanges, and the price be damned. It doesn't matter what the price is. Getting it under roof and doing it in a very private, clandestine manner is what they're doing. And then you issue the reset after they've already prepared and repositioned.
Well, Andy, this has been a great catch up. I would really appreciate you taking the time to talk about the dollar and China and the reset. I mean, these are just so current and relevant, I think, to the story of silver and gold these days. And man, you are right in the thick of it. We love having you on to talk about these things.
Thanks for having me on, and I'm always a phone call or a text away